Hi, I'm Bridget. My Girl Scout Gold Award is Real World Ready, Financial Literacy and Real World Concepts for Young Adults. Today, we are going over working, taxes, and Social Security numbers. Let's get started with income. So, what is income? Income is money received in return for your labor and work or through investments. There are three main sources of income: working for someone else, working for yourself, or investments. There are thousands of jobs that you could do, anything ranging from a doctor to a publicist to a famous singer, dancer, or even sports player. Making bank. This chart shows various high-paying jobs and their average salaries in the United States. So if you want to make a lot of money fast, go to med school. How do you work when you aren't an adult? When working in high school, a lot of states require you to get working papers once you are 14 years old. Papers were invented to protect minors from unreasonable work hours and unsafe work situations. Forms are available through your school guidance counselors. Once you get them, you fill them out and then hand them back to your school and you're ready to work. Interestingly, there is something called minimum wage. The federal minimum wage is $7.25. This is the lowest amount that you can get paid per hour of work. Each state can set its own minimum wage, which often reflects the cost of living since some places are more expensive to live on average than others. For example, New York State's minimum wage is $15.50 per hour, while Kansas is $7.25 per hour. Many people believe there are pros and cons to having minimum wage. Some of the pros are that it helps people keep up with the cost of living, and also may boost the economy because it increases consumer spending. When people have more money in their pockets, they're willing to spend more money. It also encourages legal employment of U.S. citizens. On the other hand, the cons are that it can be expensive for companies to pay all of their workers such a high amount per hour, especially for small businesses or big companies that have thousands of people they have to pay. These companies may transfer the cost of employees to consumers, which will increase the prices of goods and services. Now, onto the sad part, where people give up a lot of money. Taxes. Taxes are when the government takes part of your income to fund federal, state, and local spendings. It pays for things like roads, schools, police, firemen, the military, and lots of other things. State lotteries also help pay for spendings too. There are three main types of taxes, the first one being income tax. This is taxes owed on income you make from working, owning assets, being gifted money, or even winning a game show or the lottery. The next type is property taxes. This is taxes owed on the land and homes that you own. And finally, sales tax. Sales tax is taxes paid on things that you buy. In New York State, the sales tax is 4%. But when shopping in New York City, you also have to add city tax. So let's say you're in the city with your friends and you go to Lululemon and want to buy a shirt. You have to pay 4% in New York State tax and 4.5% in New York City taxes, which adds up to 8.5% in sales tax just for one shirt. It is one of the highest sales taxes in the country. There are some states without income tax, like Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. They are attractive to live in because you pay less money in taxes. Let's dive into income tax. Everyone pays a different percentage of income tax depending on how much money you make. The more money, the higher the percentage of income tax. It's called a graduated tax system. Employers typically withhold an estimated amount of the income taxes you owe. If you're self-employed, you have to calculate on your own or use an accountant to help you. Taxes are due on April 15th every year to the International Revenue Service, or IRS for short. Below, the graduated tax system and what you owe percentages is shown. Let's take a look at the federal income tax brackets on the left. If you make between $11,000 and $44,000 a year, you pay 12% in income tax. But as you make more money, the higher the percentage you pay. So now look at 35%. On the dollars earned greater than $243 up to $609,000, you pay 35% in income tax. In addition to federal taxes, there are also state taxes. It works in the same graduated tax system. Let's take some time and walk through how income tax really works in a detailed example. If you make $10,000 a year in income, you pay 10% in U.S. federal taxes and 4% in New York State taxes because you are in the lowest tax bracket. So you pay $1,400 in total in income tax. If you make $100,000 a year in income, you pay federal taxes of all the tax brackets leading up to how much money you make. You take the range of all the tax brackets, subtract them, and times it by the percent that bracket is. Once you get to the amount of income you make, in this case, $100,000, you subtract the lowest amount that you can make in that tax bracket, which is $95,000 in this case, and times it by 24%. You add up all those numbers, which equals $17,410, and that is how much money you pay in U.S. federal taxes. The process is the exact same for New York State taxes. You go through each of the brackets, subtract them, and times it by the percent that bracket is. Once you get all the numbers, you add them together, which in this case is $5,785. And to figure out how much you pay in income tax in total, you add the $17,000 and $5,000 together. You get $23,195 in total income taxes, which is 23.19% of your income. People generally don't like paying taxes, and this has a huge influence on who they vote for in political elections. Don't forget you also have to pay local taxes to your city and town too to help fund things like schools or paving roads. There are two key tax forms that everyone should be aware of. The first is a W-2. When you are an employee, your employer gives you a W-2 at the end of the year. The W-2 lays out how much income you've made that year and the taxes they withheld from your pay. So let's say that year you made $100. Obviously, this isn't realistic, but it's an example. You make $100 and they withheld 10% of your income for taxes. So you only got paid $90 a year. That is all shown on your W-2. It also shows your Social Security and any health benefits costs withheld from your employer. When you are self-employed, you have to keep track and estimate the taxes you owe and pay them quarterly, so that this way you don't owe a huge chunk of money at the end of the year. The next tax form is the 1099, which details the various types of income received by you that are not your salaries or tips. So this is income earned on money in the bank or investments in bonds or investments in stocks. It also details your deductions, like charity or mortgage interest. The more money you make, the more complicated your taxes get. So maybe you should use some of the money you make to hire an accountant to help you. Let's take a look at Social Security. Your Social Security number is a 9-digit number issued by the United States government. It is typically issued at birth, and it keeps track of your identity, your Social Security benefits, and your taxes. You should not share your Social Security number because it can be used to steal your identity. However, there are some cases where you'll need to share it, like legal reasons or when opening a bank account. The government, or the IRS, takes Social Security out of paychecks or you pay into the program if you are self-employed. The money goes into a huge fund that the government manages, and then Social Security is a payment you get when you're around 65 years old, so you're able to afford to play pickleball. Finally, here are some basic need-to-know life facts. The first is RSVP is French and stands for Répondez s'il vous plaît, which translates to respond if you please. So please respond to the invite. Next, tally marks count in fives. So they're a great way to keep track of large amounts of things, or if you're playing a game, points. Next is how to address an envelope. The three key components are who you're sending it to, the stamp, and the return address. Who you are sending the envelope to goes in the center. The stamp goes in the top right corner, and the return address goes in the top left. Stamps to mail a letter cost 78 cents. Stamps are canceled by the post office, which means they can't be used again. A stamp collector is called a philatelist. Thank you so much for spending the time to listen to my presentation. I hope you learned a lot, and there are some questions for you to answer at the end.